going back when I was a kid, math was pretty easy for me, and I understood math. And I just assumed my kids, I don't know, by osmosis, would just know how to do good math. And when my oldest boy started struggling when he was around 8th grade or so, I saw his national scores actually get below the district average. And so I thought, he needs some help. And I found a Mathnasium through research. And I took him to this Mathnasium and signed him up. And about 6-7 months later, all of a sudden, he's like, math is easy.
Welcome to High Trust Professionals, a podcast where we interview top industry and community leaders, business owners, and entrepreneurs from across the country. Hear what it takes to build trust, be a respected leader, be productive, and win your day. Sit back and relax as we dive into another episode of High Trust Professionals podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to High Trust Professionals podcast. I'm your host, Lynette Arrasmith, with my friend Joe Wherry, who's here today. He wears a couple different hats. So today we're going to talk about Mathnasium. But before we do that, Joe, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, what you do, what your position and role is, and then we'll kind of dive into some fun questions. Thanks for being here, by the way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Name's Joe Wherry. I'm actually from Elkhorn. I'm a lifetime resident.
That's Elkhorn, Nebraska for our national listeners and viewers.
Yeah, it's now part of Omaha.
Yeah.
It's formerly a separate little town. Used to be a little quiet town. Everybody knew everybody.
A little suburb, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of grew up, I grew up low income, 2 sick parents. One of my parents died very young. The other one was an ambulatory. And so a lot of people in the community helped me out throughout the years. And I had a lot of experiences with law enforcement officers throughout the years because they'd come to our house, check on us, things like that. I think that kind of led me to later in life to a career of law enforcement. I always wanted to be a police officer, and I went to college for criminal justice, joined Omaha Police Force. I've been on about 22 years. I've worked several different detective bureaus, Uniform Patrol Bureau, homicide, internal affairs, a couple of the last 2 detective bureaus I worked in. And then recently I switched back out to the street, back in the uniform. I'm a sergeant in charge of a crew based out of Elkhorn. So I kind of full circle came back to Elkhorn. I still live in Elkhorn. I'm still an Elkhorn resident.
So we'll just call you Sergeant in Charge.
Yep.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sergeant in Charge. Well, and I love to touch on kind of where you came from first. And for our audience, so I'll say, hey, Joe, do you have like a fun cop story for us? Well, guess what? I didn't get one because first of all, privacy. Second of all, it's not always a pretty story, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But I will touch on one. I mean,
Okay.
Briefly, when I was in the homicide unit, I had worked several other units, burglary, auto theft, robbery. Basically, it's called North Investigations, general crimes. It's a lot of work put into every single one of these cases. One of my first homicides was one that was very difficult to solve. When we initially went to the scene, we didn't have any suspects or any idea of who would be involved in this. It was one of those things where my first thoughts were this might not be solvable.
Yeah.
And the best feeling I've ever had on the police department is when we finally broke that case. And I've never felt better in my life as far as law enforcement goes, because those are such difficult cases. A lot of emotions involved, family members, etc. I mean, a person's life was taken, and to actually bring it around and solve that case and get a conviction on that case was a great feeling.
Very rewarding.
Yes.
You know, I often say, what's wrong with people? What's wrong with people? There are just so many things that could play into that. What's wrong with people? So let's change courses, because why are we really here? So Joe and I met through the West Omaha Chamber of Commerce, and we're in a small networking group together. And you, not too very long ago, purchased the franchise Mathnasium, right?
Correct.
So law enforcement by day, math nerd by night, I'm not sure, sergeant in charge. God, I'm going to have all kinds of titles for you. So let's talk about what led you to that. I mean, there's so many businesses that you could have purchased potentially. Why that?
Correct. So over the years, I often thought of what I might do beyond law enforcement, and I've always kind of liked the idea of owning a business. Wasn't sure where to start. Dad dabbled in a couple little different things. I did a little online business many years ago when I was on the police force. I was selling police equipment to other police officers. That got a little too time consuming at the time, especially with the different units I was in. Well, math, going back when I was a kid, math was pretty easy for me, and I understood math. And I just assumed my kids, I don't know, by osmosis would just know how to do good math. And one of my oldest boys started struggling when he was around 8th grade or so. I saw his national scores actually get below the district average. And so I thought, he needs some help. And I found a Mathnasium through research. And I took him to this Mathnasium and signed him up. And about 6-7 months later, all of a sudden, he's like, math is easy.
Yeah.
And he wasn't struggling anymore, and he hasn't struggled since. And so anyway, I was looking to get him into some more math help when it comes to ACT testing. And I looked into the Mathnasium that he'd gone to, and that one had closed during COVID.
Shoot. So there was a need.
So there's a need, but also when I went in there originally, I saw basically kids would walk in, they grab a binder, and they're working with the instructors. And I saw the wall of binders, and I was like, clearly there's a need for this.
Right.
And so
because a binder represented someone
each kid had their own binder.
Yeah.
And so when you see a wall of binders and all these kids come in this place, it's like, wow, this is obviously there's more than just me who needs this. And it's a huge relief for a parent to get their kid over those struggles, and they can move on, because math opens up a lot of doors.
Oh, sure it does. I mean, in business in general, I mean, in life, I mean, math, you need it to, count money, to do all kinds of things. But, I've been to your place, and here's what I loved about what I saw is to me, it was joyful. I don't know how, it's just, and I want you to describe, because what you've created and how you describe it and how you reward the kids for doing well, I think is just so interesting. So describe the whole vibe.
Yeah, kind of like our theme and our vibe at the whole place is math is fun. We basically, kids, if they're struggling, they come to us, they're stressed out. You get that attitude when they're middle school, I hate math. And everybody hears that. And I'm never going to use math in my life. Well, they don't realize how many doors math opens. Yeah. So when kids come in, we do not give them homework. They don't go home and have to do additional work at home. When they come in, our instructors work with them directly. We learn their personalities. We learn the families. We get to know these people. The way it works is there's a reward system too. Every couple pages the kid gets done, we have a cornhole board. They get a toss at the cornhole board. If they make it in there, they get a piece of candy. They get 3 tosses in a row. They get to spin the mastery check wheel. They get a mastery check. They earn basically punches each time they do this stuff.
Okay.
And then they can turn around and turn those punches in for rewards, all the way up to like a PlayStation 5 if they're there long enough and really build up a lot of cards.
Wow.
Some of the kids like to spend their cards. They just love to come in and they're like, how many cards do I have now? Because they want to get something, because we have a whole prize cabinet for them to choose from.
Okay. What was that one thing that was so popular and you just couldn't keep enough?
Oh, the Squishmallows right now.
Yes.
That is the, we try to figure out we try to cater to the kids, individuals, we get to know the kids, learn what they like. And Squishmallows is a big thing right now. And so those are just flying off the shelves. It's one of those things I got to keep buying more and more. And I take one to the back room. A kid will see me take it to the back room and they know what's back there.
Yeah.
They're looking for that one.
Yeah. They want that one.
Yes.
I think that's awesome. So talk about a couple things. First and foremost, how do you juggle it all? So what kind of help do you have, and how do you juggle? You wear multiple hats.
Correct. And that was one of the things when I was looking for a business, it was looking for something that I could do now. I'm getting close to retirement. I got 22 years on, so I can kind of look towards retirement. I work day shift, so I get done about 3 p.m., 3:30. Our business is open after school, so it's an after school program. It's only open 20 hours a week. So during the school year, it's open 3:30 to 7:30. And then we also open on a Sunday. And my wife went in this business with me too. She was a teacher assistant at a grade school, and she would come home daily and explain to me her stresses and her struggles with school right now. Not enough other teachers helping. She wasn't real happy. She loved the kids. She loved meeting the kids, getting to know the kids. She loved seeing them grow up. But at the same time, she was stressed and felt burdened by this. So she's actually goes in day to day. She determines which instructors are coming in. She works with the kids too. She's also an instructor. She kind of runs the office. I handle all the back end stuff, and then I support her in the business when I'm needed.
Sure. I love that. Well, and the other thing I like about your business is you employ other kids,
Yes.
right? So talk about that. That's super
Yes.
cool.
We have the youngest person we've employed is 14, super smart
Oh.
math. This is an 8th grade kid who was going to the high school for math.
Oh, wow.
We have a couple other kids that are freshmen right now. We have college students. We also, the way our center works, like I explained to you before, kids come in and grab a binder and work on their worksheets.
Yeah.
We don't do that at our business. I went with a model that is all digital. So kids come in, they grab a tablet, and they work on their tablets.
Oh,
which is our online system. So they also can work
do
online.
it at home.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we had one kid that was headed to Denver for vacation, and she wanted to get a lesson in, and she was working on her tablet in the car,
Oh my gosh.
working with one of our instructors.
That is super cool. So something I want to make sure that I mention, because you think I'm thinking, okay, so do I have a 14-year-old kid who's teaching my kid potentially? This is not tutoring,
No.
right? So
No.
explain the difference, because people are going to naturally think, oh, so my kid gets a tutor, but that's not really what it is.
No. And so our 14-year-old necessarily is not going to teach one of our high school students. We also have a retired math professor from college. We also have college engineering students. But the way the system works, if we have like 20 kids who come into our center and they all have the same teacher, we're going to give them a assessment. And on this assessment, their learning plan is going to be based on everything they don't know. So every kid's going to have a different individualized learning plan. So the business is very, very structured to that specific individual based on how they are. So we have kids who come to us who want enrichment. So they're way beyond their grade level. They're trying to get advanced math. They're trying to get way ahead in math. And we also have kids that are struggling. We have the whole gamut. Kids are average, below average, and above average. So we can cater it to each specific individual.
I love that. And you've had this for how long?
We opened in June last year, so not very long.
Because I'm thinking, I was at your ribbon cutting, and not very long. And seemingly super successful, because there's a need, right?
Yep.
And so then do you market to like schools? I mean, how do people, unless they were like you searching for something for one of their children, how do they even know about you?
It's definitely a destination business, so a lot of it's going to be online searching. But we do also, there is an advertisement publication that goes to every single grade school kid in Elkhorn Public Schools. So we advertise in that. Word of mouth. We're going to work towards, we have this math kit called Math Night Kit, so we can put on a math night at one of the schools, at the grade schools. And we'll probably rotate around the grade schools that are in our area eventually.
Great idea.
Yeah, as long as the schools are willing to have us, we'll put together a whole math night, STEM math night for them.
So are those the types of things that Mathnasium as a franchise can provide you, tools, or is that something that you just think of in ways that you can plug in?
A lot of the stuff is other franchisees have done it. And so then we have we have a couple of different marketing companies we go to. And so like there's one Accolade that puts together stuff. We just had a Pi Day party, and they put together a whole kit for us. It's not everything that we're going to use, but it's definitely a start.
Yeah.
So
no, then you're not reinventing the wheel, right? You can kind of feed off of what others have found successful. I love that. So let's change directions a little bit. So what advice would you give someone who wants to get started with a new business and or to buy a franchise?
First off, you need to find something that interests you. You don't want to just grab a business just because you can financially handle that business. If it's not something you're passionate about, it's not something you're, really looking forward to opening up, then obviously it's not something you're going to want to do. The math worked out great because I saw how it worked with my kid. I learned about the business first before I signed anything. I talked to other franchisees to see how the system went. It's very important to get to know as much as you can about a franchise before you enter into that contract, because it might not be right for you.
Right. Oh, totally. So then how do you even something that you're interested in, do your research. How do you determine if a franchise of sorts, whatever that business is if there are too many, if it's already like there's no room for another. How do you determine, or are there lines? Are there kind of lines in the sand of where you can market and do business? How does
Yeah.
that work?
Most big franchises. Mathnasium's a big franchise. First of all, there's 1,100 of them in the world. They're in United Arab Emirates. They're in India. They're
Oh,
in
wow.
England. They're in Canada. They started in 2002, and it's just exploded. It's all over the place because it works great.
This isn't a new idea.
No. So most franchises have areas that they are open to. They generally will do the research first in cities to find out. Now, interesting story about that. When I contacted them to put one in Elkhorn, I said I can't put one in there. They said there's not enough population in Elkhorn, but there's other places in Omaha they would open up and territory. So they actually have specific territory, advertising territories.
Okay. Interesting.
I explained to them, I grew up in Elkhorn. I explained to them about the huge growth and all the schools that have been developed recently and the massive amount of growth that's going on at that time. They looked into it, called me back a couple weeks later, says, you're right.
Yeah.
You can open it. It's yours if you want it.
That's great. Good for you. Don't take no. Lesson number 503, do not take no for an answer. I love that. So, or switch directions before we wrap it up. You have been in law enforcement for a long time. You are a business owner, so I'm going to talk about leadership a little bit. A lot of our listeners and viewers, we talk to business owners, we talk about leadership. So you've had leaders, been a leader, are a leader. How would you define a good leader?
Leader has to, first and foremost, has to be able to listen. You got to be able to listen to your employees, listen to your customers, got to be able to meet their needs and fulfill those needs. Another thing is you can't be afraid to make decisions. You got to get out there and if you're hemming and hawing on decisions and stuff like that, I mean, you're not going to get people to follow you. You're not going to get people to believe in you, that you actually know what you're doing.
Isn't that true? Sometimes you have to be decisive and you have to be willing to maybe fail forward.
Yes.
Not every decision is a great decision, but as long as you can pivot quickly.
Yes, you definitely have to be able to learn from the stuff as you go forward.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been stressed throughout my life, throughout several different steps, either personal or police department things I've run into. And I was extremely stressed the day before I opened this business.
Yeah, I bet.
It was one of those things that's new to me. I've never went to business school. I've never owned a business like this.
Yeah.
Actual brick and mortar.
Yeah.
But you got to jump in. If you really want to excel in life, you really want to move on to something else, you really got to jump in feet first and not be afraid to take that step.
I think it was Martin Luther King has a quote that talks about just take the next step. You don't have to see the entire staircase. Just take the next step. So great advice. Thank you. So if you could choose one person as a mentor or one person that you would love to have lunch or coffee with, who would that be?
Well, that's hard to say. I mean, there's been a lot of mentors in my life, but I really want to be able to, right now, also kind of a side thing is I've been looking into investing and things like that. And, Warren Buffett's one of those guys around here that everybody knows.
Absolutely.
He's found his way and he looks for, one of the big things that he mentions, he talks about, when he's looking for a business to acquire, he looks at their leadership. He looks at how everything's ran, and he wants to keep those people in place and he doesn't meddle in it. And so obviously he's a person who, that's all he does. He researches companies and their leadership and how they run everything. And that's, I think, huge. And you could probably give a lot of advice on something like that.
I agree. I love that question. I've had lots of answers. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Warren Buffett once. And we were at a meeting together, and it was, I have a picture, and I've kept it forever, because especially in Omaha, well known internationally, right? But still, just to have that Omaha base is kind of fun.
Yeah, I ran into him a couple of times at Borshans years ago.
Of course, yeah.
Because I worked at Borshans before I was a police officer.
Oh, really?
And it was interesting. I remember him coming in one day with one of his daughters, and we just kind of let him do his thing. I was security there, so we knew he was there. We all mentioned it, but he was just pretty much left alone. He did his thing. But on Berkshire Hathaway weekend, absolute madness.
Yes.
And we had to keep everybody away from him.
Yeah. Oh.
And it's like pandemonium. But a middle of a week, just a random day.
Yeah. Coming in.
he was left alone.
Be a normal person.
Yeah, it's
I
kind
love
of nice.
that. So what's the biggest piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Biggest piece of advice. I don't know. It kind of throws me for a loop.
Good. As long as I don't make you cry. I mean, I'm not Oprah or Barbara. Sometimes I think that we don't realize when good advice is being given.
Yeah.
It could be a situation. It could be a lot of things. Can you think of a time where you gave some advice?
It's really hard to say, but I have gone and I've talked to kids and I've talked to groups and I've,
And what's your
as far as
message?
law enforcement is,
Yeah.
and
Stay out of trouble.
at this point, the last couple of years have been crazy, especially as far as law enforcement goes.
Oh, terrible.
And one of the things is you have to listen. You have to. I've been told this time and time again is like when people come to us, like especially in the law enforcement part of it, they're generally it's a bad moment for them. They're in a situation where it's one of the worst moments in their life, and you have to really understand and have empathy when you're talking to these people because they're coming to you for help.
Yeah.
And they want help, and maybe you can't give them all the answers that they need, but you got to be able to listen and at least be a sounding board for them at that point and try to help them best you can.
Because a lot of emotion, a lot of high emotions, a lot of energy around that. So last thing, if you could go back to your younger self, I don't care when, you decide if it was yesterday or when you were in high school, what would you say? What would you tell yourself then?
I would tell myself not to be so afraid to take those steps because I know I could have taken some steps in the past that that I was just too uncomfortable to be able to take those steps. And if I go back, I would, it's not that scary.
I agree. Yeah, I would say the same thing. There are things you look at like, oh, should I have done that? Could I have done that? Or maybe it's something to invest in or whatever the case might be, right? So, well, let's wrap this up. Where can our listeners and our viewers find you and Mathnasium?
Well, Mathnasium, we're in Elkhorn, and our website is mathnasium.com/Elkhorn. You just got to look it up for that. I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect.
You'll see me around in uniform if you're in West Omaha. Sometimes I do security jobs at Westro's.
That's true. Yeah. Or I might see you at lunch on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you for your service, by the way. That's a big deal to be in law enforcement, and it's, especially like you said, the last few years have been volatile.
Yeah.
Volatile, to say the least.
Sure.
So thank you for your time today. Thanks for spending it with us. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining High Trust Podcast. High Trust Professionals Podcast. I'm your host, Lynette Arrasmith. Don't forget to find us on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We would sure appreciate a follow and a like. See you next time.